Hello, everyone, and welcome to our call today. My name is Scott Anderson, and I'm President and CEO of Zions Bank. And it's my honor to welcome you to our third One Zions Power Speaker Series event. We are gathered here today to recognize the month of May as Mental Health Awareness Month and to do our part in raising the awareness on mental health issues. As I've reflected upon the life-changing events of last year, 2020, I found myself acknowledging the impact these experiences have had on my overall physical and mental health. And now in 2021, as we work to recover from a global pandemic, as we work to grapple with the national reckoning around race in our country, and as we diligently seek out every opportunity and every resource we have at our disposal to provide individuals and businesses with the economic relief that they need, I feel compelled to make mental health a top priority here at Zions Bank. So on February 3rd of this year, we launched our One Zions Mental Health Initiative. Our intentions for this initiative is to bring awareness to our mental health, wellness, and resilience by offering programs and resources designed to strengthen and nurture those areas. And one of the key components of our initiative is to host quarterly mental health conversations on current and relevant mental health topics that our employees and community may be facing. And so today we are so honored to launch our first mental health conversation with one of our nation's leading mental health experts, Dr. Mark Rappaport, CEO of the Huntsman Mental Health Institute. We are honored to learn from such an accomplished, respected, and dedicated leader in the field of mental health. And I am personally so grateful that he has chosen to make Utah his home, to share his talents with our community, and to lead the Huntsman Mental Health Institute. He is really a rock star in this area. And an example of that is the faith that the legislature has put in him and the Huntsman Mental Health Institute in the appropriation that they just committed in their special session. I want to thank all of you on the call today for what you are doing to keep yourself, your teams, and the entire Zions Bank family in good health. I thank you for your participation today and for the contributions you have made to our One Zions Mental Health Initiative. I hope you will continue to be engaged with this initiative. And as I've said before, building a culture of inclusion begins with us. It begins with me, and it begins with you. And so now I'd like to turn the time over to Sui Lang Panoke, our Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Zions Bank, who will introduce our guest of honor and facilitates today's conversation. Sui Lang.
Thank you, Scott, for that warm welcome. And it is my honor to welcome all of you to our third One Zions Power Speaker Series. I just want to acknowledge all of our employees, our management and leadership who are joining our conversation together today. We also have a number of leaders across Utah's business community, nonprofit sector, interfaith community, and a number of mental health professionals joining our conversation today as well. So I just wanted to welcome everyone and reiterate that improving mental health in our community benefits all of us. And with that said, we need all hands on deck in this work, and it starts with joining conversations like this one. As Scott mentioned, our One Zions Mental Health Initiative was launched back in February. I just wanted to share the 4 components that make up this initiative. Number 1, we host weekly mindful meditation sessions every Wednesday from noon to 12:20 p.m. Mountain Standard Time with our phenomenal meditation lead, LaShawn Wilson. Secondly, we offer monthly mental resilience rethink tank conversations. Now, part of mental health is not necessarily just dealing with trauma, stress, fear, and anxiety. It's also intellectual stimulation. We oftentimes refer to this as the Zion's Book Club, where we've chosen the book Believe in People by Charles Koch and Brian Hooks to serve as the center of these conversations. And we meet every second Tuesday from noon to 1 p.m. And thirdly, we created a business forum, which is called the DMICC is the acronym, stands for Disabilities, Mental Illnesses, and Chronic Conditions. We created this space to serve as a safe space, to have intimate, deep dive conversations around a wide range of mental health topics. You can receive information, resources, and support. And then fourthly, as Scott mentioned, we're going to start hosting quarterly mental health conversations on a broad range of mental health topics. And again, we are honored to have Dr. Rappaport, CEO of the Huntsman Mental Health Institute, joining us today. If you'd like to bring him in to join me while I read his bio. So I'm going to embarrass you right now because I'm going to talk about you. But for the formal introduction of Dr. Rappaport, he's nationally recognized clinician and researcher known for his interdisciplinary approach to mental health treatment and care. He has been named CEO of Huntsman Mental Health Institute, which I will refer to, and many of us will, HMHI. So I'm going to get that acronym, in your mind. HMHI, will be saying that over and over again, not just in this conversation, but across the community. He will lead a department of nearly 300 faculty and staff and oversee operations of HMHI, a 170-bed inpatient hospital and a network of 10 outpatient clinics. Dr. Rappaport recently served as the Renette W. Harris Professor and Chair of the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the Emory University School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. He also served as Chief Psychiatric Services for Emory Healthcare Systems. During his tenure, he co-created the Emory Brain Health Center, allowing a collaborative approach to studying and solving the challenges of brain disorders. He also co-created the Addiction Alliance of Georgia with the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation, transforming how addiction and recovery services are delivered in Georgia. Before joining Emory University, he was the chair of psychiatry and behavioral neurosciences at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and professor of psychiatry at both Cedars-Sinai and the David Jeffens School of Medicine at the University of California, Los Angeles. Go Bruins. I'm a little biased there because my daughter will be attending UCLA in the fall. So she's our newest Bruin. In November 2019, the Huntsman family announced a historic gift of $150 million to establish the Huntsman Mental Health Institute. Launching in early 2021, HMHI will continue the Department of Psychiatry and its numerous programs designed to serve psychiatric patients across their lifespans. Nationally known for his leadership, writing, and research, Dr. Rappaport has received numerous awards and honors for his work. He graduated cum laude in biology from the University of California, San Diego, where he also earned his medical degree and completed his residency in psychiatry. He is thrilled to be back in the West, to be closer to his children, and enjoy the community. So Dr. Rappaport, you have been busy changing the world and healing communities. My first question to you is a personal one. Where is home for you? Is it California, Georgia, or Utah? And just want to remind you, majority of our participants today are in the state of Utah. But no judgment on your response.
Thank you very much, all of you, for having me here. And Sui Lang, thank you for an introduction that would have made my parents very proud, and I'm sure would make my children and grandchild very proud. Home for me is here. But home for me is also where my family is, because I believe that the people you love and the people you care for is where your heart is, and where your soul is, and where your time is with others. But I can't tell you how amazing it's been to be in Utah. People are welcoming, people are generous and genuine, and the commitment that everyone I've met in Utah has towards mental health is remarkable. I've never been in a place in the country where so there's been this confluence of so many leaders in business, so many leaders in religious organizations, so many leaders in the universities, as well as the philanthropy, have come together and said, mental health is a major issue. Mental health is something that we're going to address now. And so I guess that really does make Utah home for me.
So happy to hear that. And I am feeling like Utah is more and more my home as well as you continue to speak. We're so honored to have you join our community and continue to make Utah a home for all people. I want to start off today's conversation by recognizing, this mental health initiative is part of our diversity, equity, inclusion efforts here at the bank. And there are numerous reasons why, because the work of DEI and the work of mental health, there's a lot of intersectionality that exists there. Doing DEI work, it is deep work, right? It's personal, it's emotional, and it's essential to our well-being. In addition to that, mental health work is also deep work. It's personal, it's emotional, and yet essential to our well-being. So it's important to acknowledge the intersectionality there. In addition to that, I've noticed the difference in individuals' effectiveness and commitment to this type of work. What matters a lot in that equation is your why. So I'm curious if you could share with us, what is your why, right, that led you down that journey and path to pursuing a career in mental health, and just share us that personal story.
Thank you. I'll do that, but I'm going to derail the question first.
Well, great. It's all about you. Conversation. Or where you want to take the conversation.
It's all about our people. And the reason why I'm doing this is that if we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of the groups that has truly been discriminated against repeatedly, not just in our society, but throughout the world, are people with brain disorders and people with substance use disorders and mental health disorders. And so I really am thrilled that Zions Bank and the larger companies, part of Zions Bank, understand that if we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we must also talk about the empowerment of people with brain disorders, be it what we think of traditionally as mental health disorders or substance use disorders. And that this is not a matter of personality flaws. It's not a matter of weakness. These are people that are suffering with brain diseases, just like people suffer with diabetes or heart disease. So thank you so much for recognizing that the way you have and including this in your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. I can't tell you how grateful I am for that.
Thank you. Thank you for that acknowledgement. That means a lot.
Yeah. As for me, I meandered. And I think that's an important lesson, particularly for our children. Although I came from a family of physicians, both of my grandparents were physicians. They were both, well, one side was an immigrant, the other one was first generation. And both of them worked jobs as they went to medical school. And then my father also was a physician, as was my uncle. So there was my dad used to joke when I was younger, Mark, you complete freedom of what you want to do. You can be any type of doctor you want to be. And of course, being a good son, I did exactly the opposite. And I felt it was very important to explore many things in my undergraduate career. So I took a year of experimental music. I took 2 years of poli-sci. I took, God knows why, I took infinite series and differential equation mathematics classes. And unfortunately, I took all of those classes at the same time. It was before they had computerized the records. And so all of a sudden, I had 4 final exams on the same hour of the same day. And boy, did I have a lot of unhappy professors. But one of the things that was the greatest influence on me was that while I was in college, a couple of things happened. One is that I had the good fortune of working as the administrative intern for the chancellor of the university. And there I met a wonderful man who was the assistant to the chancellor. He had a master's degree, was incredibly smart and innovative, and really was a true mentor to me. But one of the things I realized was that he was always going to be the assistant to the chancellor, and that there was value in getting an advanced degree if the types of things I wanted to work on were broader and larger issues.
Mm.
Another thing I realized during that period of time, and I was blessed, I was a member of the Disabled Student Union at UCSD. Although I'm not disabled, I was an able-bodied member. And we were able to put on for the university a Disabled Persons Awareness Week. And we actually got the chancellor in a wheelchair. And as he was trying to cross the campus and somebody had parked in front of the curb cuts, all of a sudden he had an understanding of how difficult these issues were for people in a wheelchair and disabled. And he was so infuriated, he called and had the car towed. But it also massively increased his awareness. And that taught me the importance of these social movements and social issues. When I turned 21 on my 21st birthday, I looked back at where I was, and I looked back at where I wanted to be. And what I realized is I wanted to do something in this world where when I look back on my life, I would be able to say that I contributed to others, and that my life made a difference for others. And so on my 21st birthday, although I'd always taken a smattering of science, I decided to go to medical school and took nothing but science for a year, ended up teaching for a year. I taught math K through 3, and then went to medical school. Mm. In medical school, what drove me to psychiatry was the fact that to be in psychiatry, you treated the whole person. You needed to know about that person's childhood. You needed to know about that person's current living circumstance. You needed to know not only what was going on physically, but also what was going on emotionally. It led me to an important understanding that the mind and the body were connected. Mm-hmm. That's why God made the neck.
Great point. Such a compelling story of compassion, empathy, and allyship. I love what you did with the chancellor there, to have an experience of experiencing what it is like, right, to be in a certain circumstance. Again, builds humility and empathy and compassion for those people that may not experience those things every day. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for sharing that story with us. I want to bring in my friends here at the bank, Christy Meyer, who serves as the chair of our Disabilities, Mental Illnesses, and Chronic Conditions Business Forum, and then also Scott Law, who serves as Zions Bank Corporation's Enterprise Human Resources Chief Human Resources Officer. I always have to think twice before I state your title. So welcome, Christy and Scott, to the conversation. Just wanted to start off by defining mental health so that we're all on the same page here as we engage in this conversation. And we thought we'd pull from the World Health Organization's definition. There is no health without mental health. Mental health is defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, and can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. Now, Dr. Rappaport, any thoughts on that definition? How would you define mental health? And I'm also curious if you have a special definition that you use for patients.
You know, thank you, Sui Lang, for the question. And what she also did, by the way, guys, is did a memory test, because she asked me a question with, I think, about 3 different areas of response. So we get to see whether or not I remember them.
We'll see how strong your mind is, right? Yeah. We're trying to flex that muscle today.
Yeah. One, I very much like the World Health's definition of mental health. And I also like the preamble that there is no health without mental health. And why do I like it? Because the brain is the largest and most complex organ in the body. And too often, and primarily because of fear, and to a certain extent because the brain is privileged in the sense that it's unlike the heart, where it's easy to get an electrocardiogram that gives you sort of an idea of some heart function, or a blood test that you can get to look at your liver or your kidneys. The brain's been much more privileged and protected. And by being so, it's also been a source of mystery and fear. So I like the fact that they're saying there's no health without mental health, because it talks about the mind and the body being connected. It talks about the fact that, as CEO Mr. Anderson talked about earlier, you know, the stress that all of us have gone through over the last period of time with COVID, be it the social isolation, be it the blurring of roles that people play, where all of a sudden, for people working at home, they not only have their work life at home, but their home life at home. And unfortunately, often these roles have been blurred and at times in conflict. You know, it's just been tremendously stressful. And as you see with stress, when your body is stressed by the psychological things that occur, we're more likely to have sleep problems. We're more likely to eat too much. We're more likely to give in to eating sweets or substances of abuse. We're more likely to suffer. Over 40% of people responded that they were suffering from symptoms of anxiety and depression during the pandemic. And also physiologically, if you look at your body, what else is going on is, believe it or not, when you're psychologically stressed, your immune system gets turned on, and you actually have mild chronic inflammatory states go on. When you're chronically stressed, the fight or flight axis of the body, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, is set into overdrive. And so you actually end up in a circumstance where you're producing more cortisol than you normally would. And cortisol has a host of effects on the body. You're also, in this time of stress, shifting the balance of one's body between what's called the parasympathetic system, which is sort of the standard system involved in daily homeostasis and the balance of your body, and the fight or flight system, the sympathetic system. And so you're shifted to more sympathetic activity. And in doing so, it changes your energy utilization, it changes your sleep patterns, it changes your ability to concentrate. So yes, there is no physical health without mental health, because these two systems are highly integrated. However, I want to make a couple of other points, since you asked me 3 components to the question. The second component I'd like to address, that's only 2.5 components there. The 2.5 components I want to address is the fact that in our lives, we all go through periods of where we're feeling more vulnerable in terms of our psychiatric, psychological, mental health feelings, and less vulnerable. We all go through periods of time where our sleep will be disturbed for a while, or where we might be worried or anxious about something occurring. So it's not just a dichotomous circumstance where either it's mental health and you're great, or you're mentally ill and sick. All of us go through these dynamic periods of time in our life based on our social circumstances, our physical health, and the health and social circumstances of people we love. The third issue, which is how do I talk about mental health with my own patients? Well, one of the things I tell my patients is, congratulations, you're normal. As you can see, I have gray hair. So I've so far been fortunate enough to live a few years. I hope to live a few more. But one of the things that happens to all of us over time is different organ systems in our body tend to act out. Some people's bodies will act out and get chronic disease. When I was in my 20s, I developed a disease called Crohn's disease. And I've dealt with that my entire adult life. What I talk with my patients about is the fact that it is normal for our organ systems in our bodies, particularly as we age and particularly as we're exposed to different things, at times to need help. And when the brain needs help because of changes in brain circuitry that's going on, sometimes we use medicine, sometimes we use talk therapy, sometimes we use some of the newer, what we call somatic therapies like repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, or other forms of more sort of mechanistic therapies that we do. So I talk with my patients about that it isn't that you've had a weakness, it's not that you have a character flaw, it's not that you're not tough enough, it's that just like people have challenges with less sophisticated organ systems in the body, right now you're having some challenges with the most sophisticated one, the brain, and that working together, we'll work together to make it better.
Wow, I love that. The mind is such a fascinating thing, and the way you talk about it makes it even more fascinating. I want to just kind of set the stage for mental health in the state of Utah. In Utah, let's see, where am I? Define it. In Utah, well, 18% of Americans suffer from depression. In Utah, it's 21%. Utah ranks 7th in the nation in suicide deaths. The leading cause of death among Utahns ages 10 to 17 is suicide. So it's deeply impacting our youth. 68% of patients who are prescribed antidepressants in Utah are women. And I'm going to wrap this last statistic in there. Mental Health America, they rank states on adult access to mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And Wyoming ranks number 46. Idaho ranks number 47, and Utah ranks number 51 because they include the District of Columbia in this study. Now, these statistics are alarming, which makes the role of leaders like you in institutions like the Huntsman Mental Health Institute essential in healing our community now than ever before. So please share with us the vision and mission of the Huntsman Mental Health Institute, and what do you hope to accomplish in this role? Also, I would love for you to explain why Utah, Wyoming, and Idaho are ranking so low on that spectrum as well.
Sure. And so, as usual, I won't follow the question to begin with, and then I will. I wanted to point out to people that one of the reasons why women receive antidepressants prescriptions at 68% is that for reasons that we're just beginning to discern, depression is twice as common in women as it is in men. And the same holds true with many of the anxiety disorders that are treated primarily with the classes of drugs we call antidepressants. They're good for treating both many forms of anxiety disorder as well as depression. And so part of that sex bias is actually due to the fact that there's a sex bias in terms of the prevalence of certain mental disorders. If we look at other mental disorders like manic depressive illness or bipolar disorder or psychotic disorders, the ratios are more 50-50. If we look at substance use disorders, the ratios tend to favor men, it being more prevalent in men than in women. If we look at suicide attempts are more common in women, but completed suicides are more common in men. So there are real sex issues that we need to address and understand as well. As for the Huntsman Mental Health Institute, I want to take a sec to talk about why it's really cool.
Yeah, please.
It's amazing. There's never been a confluence of events like there is here. There's never been a confluence of events where you have a very thoughtful and powerful and generous family like the Huntsmans who say, we're drawing a line. What's happened previously with mental health cannot continue. It cannot continue for Utah. It cannot continue for the country, and it can't continue internationally. And the Huntsmans have said, we want to make a transformative difference. And it's not just that initial wonderful, generous gift, but it's their active participation in everything we do. I am blessed to meet with the Huntsmans either by phone, text, or in person, usually at least once a day, and many times 2 or 3 times a day, because they are passionate about that. At the same time, having a prominent, passionate family isn't enough. Ruth Watkins, the former president of the University of Utah, Mike Good, the current interim president and senior vice president of health affairs, and Dan Reed, the provost of the University of Utah, were brave and willing to do something that no university system's done previously. And that's to say, mental health is a huge problem, and we at the University of Utah are going to make it a university-wide priority. But that, and again, isn't enough. What happened next at the same time of all this, and again, this is the reason why I came here, is that the state legislature in Utah, over the last decade or so, but particularly the last 5 or 6 years, has really been prescient. They've developed here in Utah the best integrated crisis system in the nation, thanks to the wisdom of the state of legislature in Utah. They've funded now, and they're just being built, 4 crisis centers for people with mental health disorders, so that they're not going to emergency rooms. The people with mental health disorders wait longer for care and have the longest length of stay in the emergency room of any group of patients. Emergency rooms aren't equipped to handle people with brain disorders, in particular mental health disorders. And the state of Utah is giving funds for building 4 mental health crisis centers where people with mental health disorders and their loved ones can come in the state when they're in crisis. And the state has done a number of things, as CEO Anderson talked about, including making a commitment to build a translational mental health research building that will allow us to bring together all the different people we need to bring together to tackle serious problems of mental health, not just for Utah, but for the nation. And that leads us to what we're doing here. the intent of the Huntsman Mental Health Institute is not to skate to where the puck is, but to skate to where the puck's going to be. Our initial priority areas include reduction in stigma, the primary prevention and preemptive interventions for young people and children so that they don't develop mental health disorders or substance use disorders, and so that they can stay in school and be productive members of society, and that their families, instead of being traumatized by having a child with a mental health disorder, is able to be more productive and healthier as well. Another area that we're taking the lead on is suicide and suicide prevention. The crisis system, where we're getting over 11,000 calls a month to our crisis line. The crisis system embedded in our app, the Safe UT, which has been disseminated K through 12 in all the universities. We've also developed one for people returning who were in the National Guard and taking care of our country. We also have developed one for first-line responders during the time of COVID. And in fact, we're partnering to bring that to Intermountain Health as something that Intermountain Health will have as well, and all the first responders throughout the state, including police and fire. So suicide and the biology of suicide. Hillary Kuhn, one of our scientists, has recently published a paper where she was able to identify a series of different genetic loci that may be associated, and it's not one change in a gene, it's a series of changes in multiple genes that may put certain people at greater risk of harming themselves. So a comprehensive view of suicide. And then rural and frontier mental health is another major initiative of the Huntsman Mental Health Institute. We need to come up with new ways of reaching out to people, new ways of connecting. And we're very committed to doing this. In fact, we will be beginning a very large needs assessment for rural mental health, frontier mental health, suburban mental health, and urban mental health. So we are just completing the draft of the RFP, the request for proposals, and we will go out and identify the best firm to help us understand what the needs here in Utah are and how we can create a model system that then can be used in Idaho and Wyoming and Montana and other places, not just first in the United States, but also internationally as well. The last area of focus is workforce development. And we need to come up with smarter, better approaches to this as well. And we're committed to this. Part of the other component of what we do at the Huntsman Mental Health Institute is that whichever project we're working on, we're going to bring together everyone that's necessary to do that. So if you look, for example, at child mental health, we're going to need experts in the legislation. We're going to need experts in the social determinants of health. We're going to need experts in the field of law. We're going to need experts in business, as well as experts in what's called dissemination science. How do you actually get new treatments and new approaches to mental health out to people and get people to actually accept and use them? As well as the more traditional clinical investigators and preclinical and translational scientists, all working together to take on these issues. And we are going to need everyone within the state of Utah and beyond to join us in these endeavors. We need to use ourselves as the state of Utah and everyone as a living laboratory. So we figure out best what works for us and what doesn't work, so that we can bring the best of care to every single person here in Utah and beyond Utah. So you asked me a simple question, and boy, do you get monologues.
Right? We really just need to pose one question and listen to you just take it away all day long. Wow, I have never been so proud to be a Utahn. And I already feel healthier, right? Just hearing you tell the story of how many people are on board, committed, and most importantly, investing in this work. So we are so grateful to be a part of that as well. Let's jump down to Scott.
Yeah, Dr. Rappaport, thanks so much again for joining us and sharing your insights with us. You know, our experience here at Zions is that we've had frontline employees who've been through the pandemic, have been really heroic for us in serving our customers and experienced a lot of stress through that and really taking on a different level of risk than another segment of our population that we're really told to go home to try and help society get over this this pandemic. And we'll talk about maybe the differences in those experiences and what we can do as an organization to build more empathy here. But I wanted to maybe circle back to something that's common amongst all of our employees that I've heard over the past year is that if you look at, so many of us are parents and the struggles of their children through this time. It's been a source of tremendous stress, I think, for all parents, and how they can support their children and look out for their own mental well-being of their kids. Scholastic achievement is down. That's introducing stresses. What sort of insights or guidance could you provide those of us on the call who have children and are concerned about them and how to help them continue to achieve and get through all this?
Well, thank you, Scott. And I think that all of us as parents, or in my case, a parent and a grandparent, have wisdom to add to this. I can say a few things. One of the things that I would suggest everyone does is just take a step back. And our children desperately need to know that they're loved. They desperately need to know that we care for them, and also that we're proud of them as people. One of the things to remember is that, the brain doesn't finish developing until you're about 24.
Yeah.
And also it's really important, and this is really hard. It's really hard for parents to realize how important they are to their kids and how much they end up shaping their children. And a lot of it isn't what we think we're doing. So let me give you an example. We may have an interaction. I'm going to use an example that's actually from psychiatry. Or actually, you know what? I'm going to use an example. It's okay for me to change my mind. That comes from being a leader, okay? So one of the things that happens when you're a leader, and being a parent is being a leader, whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happens is that, for example, I'll have somebody who wants to tell me something, and they're really worried about what they're going to tell me, and worried that somehow I might take it the wrong way or be upset. They have all these sort of fantasies about how I'm going to act, right? They have nothing to do with actually how I act. More times than not, I'm really grateful that somebody's going to tell me stuff, including stuff that they are worried about because they think it's bad or something that is wrong. But the point I'm trying to make about it is that as a parent, many times our children have worries or fears that they're going to disappoint us, or that we're going to think that they're bad, or think that they're wrong, they're not a good child because of their humanity. And during this time of COVID, during this time of stress, during this time where kids haven't been able to have the tools that they would normally have not just for their education, but for their social development.
Yeah.
You know, during this time, you know, our kids are being subjected to tremendous pressures that none of us experienced because we haven't lived through being a child of COVID during the COVID time. And although academic performance may not be as good, although a child may be acting out some by playing video games more or by saying, no, I don't want to do this, or no, you know, it's important for us as parents, one, to have compassion about that, and two, to realize that many times our kids, because their worldview is narrow compared to us, their worldview is, are you know, you as parents and maybe my neighborhood a little bit. Their worldview, you are very, very powerful. So sometimes actions that are inadvertent on your part, or actions where you think you're just saying, no, you shouldn't do that, and that's all there is to it, end up having a much greater and more profound effect. So love them, praise them, help them understand when there are challenges. Not just that you did something wrong, but why it's wrong and what they could do differently. So they're empowered to know how to do things differently. Now, I say all that, but it's really important to recognize that all of us, our fuses are about this long right now.
Yeah.
So step back and give yourself some credit too, because it's really critical.
Thanks so much. I think that's really helpful, particularly just bringing me into sharper relief, sort of the perspective that children have, that it's so much narrower and smaller. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Dr. Rappaport, I think redefining normalcy is a major challenge we're also facing right now, especially with the pandemic still ongoing and the high degree of uncertainty that we're still facing. What concerns are you hearing from patients and the mental health community at large about returning to a new normal? And are there any best practices we can implement in our own lives to make that transition a little bit easier?
Sure. I think that one of the first things that we are talking about is the fact that all of us are feeling a sense of less control than usual. And that lack of what we call in psychiatry, using jargon, agency, lack of feeling in control of your life, has had profound effects in different phases of the pandemic. As we move towards the next phase, and we should really recognize that a return to work, a return to some of what we did previously, is but another transition in this process that we all abruptly began, a year ago, February or something. You know, it is going to be a time of tumult and transition. So recognizing that even as things are getting better, the fact that they're getting better, the fact that, again, we're going through another transition, that it's going to be more challenging than we think for people, all of us, is important. Another thing that's important to recognize is that although many of us are going to want to say, oh, those events are in the past, oh, COVID's in the past, it's not in the past. Many people have lost loved ones. Other people, for the first time in their life, were very sick, and although they might have recovered, they all of a sudden realize that they're not immortal. And that's very frightening for people. Other people experienced many symptoms of many events that lead to trauma. And those events are still going to be with us, whether it's having true PTSD or whether it's having subclinical PTSD and triggers that one didn't have before. So during this period of time, there's going to be a time of a fair amount of vulnerability, a fair amount of, at times, intolerance and anger. And it's going to manifest itself, even though supposedly returning to normalcy. But we don't fully know right now what the new normal is. And for many people, that's really disconcerting. So, as I said, we're in a phase of a longer process that we're coming out of a very isolating, frightening, traumatic period of time, and a time of tremendous sadness and loss for many people, and a time also where many people for the first time felt depressed or used substances, to a time where we're trying to return back to a semblance of what we had prior to COVID. But there's just going to be a lot of scars that we're going to need to get through in this process. I hope that makes some sense.
It does. That's such great insight. And I mean, we've all experienced the same global traumatic event, but our experiences with it have been so individual and so different. And all of our visions about what the new normal should look like is so different. So I'm so grateful for the company's focus this year on mental health. And I just think it's so important that as we return to whatever our new normal is, that we focus on empathy and trying to have even greater understanding for one another and all of our team members.
Love that, Christy. And in the interest of time, we really want to devote as much time as possible to questions that our employees and other registrants have submitted before today's session. And so we're going to have Christy facilitate that. We just want to get through as many questions from participants as possible, and then we'll start wrapping up around 1:20. So Christy, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. So our first question, what are your thoughts on the term toxic positivity? Do you think trying to see the bright side is always beneficial, or can that prevent healing?
Do you mind if I need to step away for 1 second, because I'm going to get something off my wall in order to answer this question.
Yes, of course.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I love the way his brain works.
Okay, so I'm a terrible person to answer that question, and let me explain why. This is something my wife gave me. You can't read it, of course, so I'll read it to you. A positive attitude may not solve all your problems, but it will annoy enough people to make it worth the effort.
I love that. Can I get a copy for my seriously? Love your wife.
That's my wife bought that for me a number of years ago, and it's hung in my offices for years now because her contention is that I'm ridiculously positive. So I'm not a good person to ask about any toxic positivity, because I personally believe, and we actually know, if you look at the work that's been done in positive psychology and in behavioral activation, that one of the ways that you can help to treat individuals with depressive disorder and to treat people with certain forms of anxiety disorder is actually to help them refrain their thinking from catastrophic thinking or ruminating about potentially negative events or previous events towards more positive thinking about events, and also towards what we call behavioral activation, where you actually are prescribing people and facilitating people learning how to go out and do more activities that are stimulating and pleasurable for them. I think where we run into challenges with some people is when there are interactions with individuals and the person one person is expressing dismay or just something that's very painful or a challenge or problem that they're going through. And the other person, particularly if there's somebody like me, instead of being able to hear what that person is going through, instead of being able to be there for that person in his or her space, is saying, oh, just get over it, or, oh, just go do this instead. And that makes the person who's talking about things that are very painful feel not heard and not understood. And and I can tell you, so professionally, I can do this really well. But within the context of my relationships with my wife and kids, I have to work on this all the time. That sometimes all my family want to do is to be able to discuss the challenges they're feeling. And it's not my job to intervene, and it's not my job to solve it. So I suspect that may be what this question was about.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. I think it's very important to balance being able to feel and acknowledge your feelings and express those fully. And then also, like you mentioned, cognitive behavioral therapy and ways to make it so you can better cope with those feelings and experiences that we've all had.
Yeah.
All right, our next question. My spouse's brain doesn't seem to stop going. They are always second guessing things they have said throughout the day and feel like people don't like them because of it, even though it's unwarranted. It's especially difficult at night when they're trying to sleep and can't because their mind keeps running. Do you have any suggestions that can help with something like that?
Yeah. One is I would really suggest that spouse would benefit from seeing a good therapist, because what they're talking about are a couple of things. One of the things that they're talking about is a pattern of negative rumination, this sort of obsessing about negative things that are, or one's perception that some of those things are negative, and interpreting one's actions with others in a way that may be unrealistic and not correct. But what that points to is the fact that such a person is tormenting oneself. And this is something that can be worked on with therapy. As you were mentioning, earlier, cognitive behavioral therapy is a very effective intervention for that. There also are other therapies that are based on compassionate meditation, that are based on acceptance, that are very good at helping individuals that are tormenting themselves this way. But these negative cognitions, these obsessive ruminations are treatable. And it doesn't mean that that person is defective. What it means is certain brain circuits are overly activated and others are underactivated, and that we can treat this with psychotherapy. And sometimes you need medicines, but we can treat this, and that person doesn't have to suffer that way. And also, what that person needs to realize is that they're causing their loved ones to suffer as well, because these negative ruminations manifest themselves in terms of anxiety and worry that one's spouse and one's children see. So if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for your kids and do it for your spouse.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally do therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy specifically, and because I have these exact same issues, and I can speak to the fact that it is extremely beneficial. However, I do wonder, in case there's anybody watching right now that either isn't ready to take the step of going to therapy, who can't afford therapy, are there any other tools and resources that you can recommend that might be helpful?
Sure. There are some wonderful tools on the internet. There are if you go to the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill website, if you go to the Depression and Bipolar Disorder Association websites, or some of the other ones that you're going to show, Mental Health America, there are lots of tools there available for self-help. And self-help tools are very useful. So if you look at what's been done in the UK, there's a program that David Clark developed for the entire UK. It's called IATAP. And David trained therapists that were bachelor's prepared, master's prepared, PhD, and they're giving over 1.1 million cases of psychotherapy for patients, 1.1 million patients a year. And one of the things that they found was about 30% of individuals, all they needed was really access to some of these self-help websites to get better and to feel less distressed. Mm-hmm. So it's important to know that these resources exist. The American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, all have resources also available for people. And I know at the end, you guys are going to give out a lot of other resources. So stay tuned.
Yes, absolutely. We have lots of great resources, as well as our employee assistance program that we'll be discussing at the end of the call.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Rappaport, I just love that whole idea of being able to be treated and heal in your own home.
Yeah.
Right? Through these special websites. That's phenomenal. Groundbreaking.
It is. And there actually are entire CBT courses and programs that can be done online. And there's data showing that their results are essentially as good if one adheres to the program and really does the homework and does all the work.
Yeah.
The pilots and small studies have demonstrated that approach is about as effective as in person.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, we hear a lot about the benefits of things like meditation, yoga, breathing techniques. What would you say are the top concrete things that we can practice to strengthen our mental resilience?
Thank you. You know, I love simple questions. Not
a whole lot of them in the mental health field.
No. I think one of the first steps to really strengthening one's resilience is, and this is going to sound bizarre, but I think part of it is just realizing that we're human. Realizing that we all have good days and bad days. We all have pressures and stresses. And also realizing that it's okay if you had a bad day. It's okay if you didn't sleep well because you were anxious about something. One or two or infrequent feelings like that we all have. And that's important so that we don't pathologize sort of the range of normalcy that we have. However, what are some of the things that one can do? One of the things that one can do is exercise. And it doesn't matter what type of exercise one does. I'll tell you, I exercise every single day. I get up every morning, and the first thing I do 7 days a week is to exercise. It's my time. And it does a couple of things. One, we know that exercise decreases symptoms of anxiety. It decreases symptoms of depression. And there are studies where exercise has been used as both a monotherapy for depression in certain cases, as well as an augmentation treatment, and particularly with augmentation, the results are tremendous. But exercise is very, very helpful. I don't care if it's yoga. I don't care if it's running, hiking, walking briskly for 20 minutes a day. I don't care what you do, weightlifting, it will help. Another thing that you can do is, and different things work for different people. So that's another part of resiliency that's important. There is no one path. There are many potential paths to things that will facilitate you feeling better, keep you from getting ill or getting sick. Exercise one, for some people, meditation is very, very helpful if one can do it. Not everybody can meditate. And I've taken courses in compassionate-based meditation. My wife has gone through a whole series of trainings in Buddhist meditation and other stuff as part of a compassionate-based meditation sort of adventure and learning. And it's not for everybody. And so if it works for you, that's great. It's a very useful tool for those that can do it, but many people can't. Believe it or not, and now I need to explain a conflict of interest. I have been funded by the National Centers for Complementary and Integrative Health for about the last 20 years. One of my major areas of work has been massage. And for people that like massage, massage is useful in decreasing stress. We have data showing that it changes immune function in a positive way. It increases the release of a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is associated with affiliation and a desire essentially it makes you feel good. So another useful technique is massage. But in general, touch is very healing for many, many people. One of the problems we've had with the pandemic is people haven't been touching each other. And touch in itself can, again, modulate neurohormones, modulate stress response in a positive and healing way. Other things that you can do is be moderate in any consumption of alcohol or coffee. Both of them are useful and socially powerful in many ways, but also excessive coffee, excessive tea, excessive alcohol will decrease one's resilience dramatically. Sleep is incredibly important, but you always get into a vicious cycle with sleep. Oh, I need to sleep more. I'm worried about not sleeping enough. And you get into this cycle if you're not careful, where you sort of perpetuate not sleeping enough. But certain things you can do around to help you sleep is you want that last period of time in the day to be a time when you're winding down. You want it to be a time where you're not spending a lot of time looking at screens, be it one of these or be it the television. You want to do certain things that are slowing you down and soothing for you. You want the temperature of the room not to be too hot. And ideally, you'd like to block out as much light and as much extraneous noise as possible to facilitate you sleeping better. And again, alcohol's been shown to disrupt your sleep. So if you have some alcohol earlier in the evening, stop. Don't continue to drink later in the evening. It will disrupt your sleep, as is the case with caffeinated beverages. So those are some of the things that you can do to enhance resilience. But I think the other thing to do is get support from people you love. Get support from people you respect and care about, and know that all of us need support. All of us need to be able to share with others when we're feeling distressed or worried about something, and that's normal, and that by sharing frequently, you can get relief of some of the pent up thoughts you have, as well as hopefully support from that person you're talking to.
Thank you. So many different practices that we can all implement. And I like how you also mentioned that different things are going to work for different people. So everyone, as you're trying different techniques, remember that there are techniques also discussed and listed in our employee assistance app, LifeWorks, that you can utilize as well. And just be patient with yourself as you figure out what does work for you. Okay, how can we be empathetic toward our team members while also acknowledging we need an environment of productivity? Do you have advice for our management teams?
No pressure. This was Scott's question.
Well, and again, I'll twist the question for starters, and then we'll get there. One of the things that's really important to realize, and I think that you and Zions Bank have realized this and are actually doing it with these different programs you've launched, is that one of the greatest causes of inefficiency at work is our mental health problems. So the more you address, as you're doing with those 4 initiatives you're talking about, the more you address the mental health problems, the more you allow people to get treatment for those problems and encourage them to do that, you'll have dramatic decreases in presenteeism and absenteeism. You'll also have an increase in employee satisfaction, and it will help with retention of valuable people and employees. So one of the things is something you're already doing by today and by the various activities you've already launched. And so that's a really important thing to do. A second thing to know is I think there's a difference between empathizing with individuals and you can empathize with somebody and you can still hold them accountable. And that's important to know. And so, yeah, right now, as Scott discussed earlier, you've got one group of individuals that were required to be in the office still and be on the front lines. And they were subjected to one series of stresses. And as we transition back to more normalcy, they're going to have some challenges around that. But what they need to also recognize, and well, one, we need to celebrate them as heroes.
Yeah.
We really do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
2, the folks that all of a sudden had their regular rhythm of life disrupted. And there was one group of individuals whose rhythm of life were disrupted and who didn't have a partner and didn't have children. And those individuals had a tremendously isolating experience over the last 12 plus months. People with children and families, they had a whole other series of stressors where all of a sudden there was no such thing as a separation between work and home life. And then particularly when children were learning remotely, they were all of a sudden part-time teacher, part-time childcare person while working full-time. And again, stuck in an enclosed environment where they were amongst themselves all this period of time.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need to be empathetic. We need to recognize, and I think it's important to have discussions like we're having right now about the stresses that people have gone under and the fact that there will be some residua because of that, but also that all of us are interdependent on one another. for our work to be successful.
That's right.
And so for Zions Bank to be successful, for Zions Bank to be successful in its mission of helping others, we all have to do what our jobs are and our expectations are. And if for some reason there's a problem with that, we need to be open and honest about it, and there needs to be a discussion of what's going on. But holding people accountable is a very reasonable expectation. And in certain ways, it's actually, I think for many people, it's very helpful, because we as a species tend to do more poorly when we don't have structure in our lives, when we don't have what are called in German Zeitgebers, these sort of anchor points in our lives that give our lives a certain balance and give our lives a certain regularity and rhythm. And one part of that regularity and rhythm is our work and what our expectations are in terms of performance at work.
Yeah.
So you ask a complex question and you get a rambling answer.
No, I think I really appreciate that, because I think that will be part of many discussions, as the population that was working remotely, as they start to transition back into the office. Hopefully we'll be able to listen to one another and understand that this was not the panacea. I'll use my own example. I thought, look, when the pandemic hit and we understood that we would have to work remotely, I actually thought, well, this is when we all thought we would be back in the office by Memorial Day or May 1st. I thought, well, this will be kind of nice, and, over the past year, I've been through ups and downs, much like everybody else on this call. And no matter what situation we've been in, I think we've all experienced sort of those oscillations in the experience. So, yeah.
Agreed. And I also think our One Science Mental Health Initiative just got the endorsement of Dr. Rappaport.
Yes.
But we appreciate that. I mean, happy to hear that we're doing some things right, and always open to other suggestions on how we can make it better.
One closing question, Dr. Rappaport. Through this experience, we've had a situation in the HR team, very difficult to deal with. We lost a colleague to domestic violence.
Oh.
One of the, it was awful. But one of the things I talked about with our team through much of this was the loss of connectivity, and how can we identify, but we didn't really have an opportunity to understand what might have been going on. And are there signs or signals that we should look for to, so we can be supportive of our colleagues or identify some stress there that, because I think that was one thing our team was really, but just had some real heartache about, is that we just weren't able to help this colleague. We didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's, again, very complicated. But some of the simple things to think about is, if a colleague all of a sudden is quieter and more withdrawn than previously, that it's absolutely, I believe, as a caring person, reasonable to ask, hey, is something happening? Is something going on? As a colleague or a supervisor, if all of a sudden there's a change in work, and change in attendance at meetings, a change in the quality of work going on, I think it's reasonable and actually kind to ask, gosh, you're not doing your normal stuff. Is something happening here? Is something going on? If you see someone, and it's more extreme, but acting out, all of a sudden they seem like they're hungover, or they seem like they're disinhibited more in work than they should be because of intoxication or other reasons, it's very reasonable to pull people aside and ask, and be caring, be loving. And we ask because we care. We ask because, these people in our lives are important, whether they're in our work life or in other life. So one of the things to do is when there's any sort of obvious change in behavior, and it persists more than a day, it's reasonable to ask. It's reasonable to reach out and say, I'm doing this because I care about you. And to do that. Another thing that's very important, and it's something that I think you guys are already doing, is to work on creating a culture where it's okay for people to be vulnerable. And it's okay for people to come to you with problems. So encouraging people to bring their problems forward and letting them know that you're not going to punish them for it. If anything, you're going to help them.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Scott, for posing that question. 'Cause I know there's so many of us here in Zion's world that are still processing and mourning that loss of one of our own. And so, so helpful. Thank you so much for your suggestions. In the interest of time, I think we'll just start wrapping up now. And Christy, did you want to just briefly mention a couple of resources? We'll also have a slide at the end of today's session that we'll post all of the resources that we put together for everyone.
Yes, absolutely. So the slide will have all of the specific details for the resources that we're sharing. We are sharing the information for the Huntsman Mental Health Institute and all of their various services that they offer. It is also important to note that the Huntsman Mental Institute is part of our U of U Aetna Standard Network. So those of you that are on that network, that is a service that's a network for you. The Zion's HR team has put together a fantastic mental health resource page. So we've got a link to that. There's also various mental wellness links that we're going to be sharing that are specific to various DE&I groups. And then I do, of course, want to mention our LifeWorks group. If you aren't already aware, LifeWorks can offer up to 5 free counseling sessions per incident, depending on your specific situation. And they have various other resources from meditation to helpful articles around mental illness and all kinds of other things that can help you with your life. We did do a deep dive into LifeWorks for our DMICC April meeting, where we went over the website, how to use it, what all the various benefits are. There is a recording of that on the newsroom, and we've also shared that in our Teams channel for the DMICC. We are also, of course, hopeful that all of you will join the DMICC. I'm sure most of us either have experienced mental health issues in the past year or throughout our lives, or we at least have family and friends that do as well. So we talk about lots of different resources. We have some exciting guest speakers coming this summer. Specifically, one that I'm excited about is Kristen Cox, who is a keynote speaker, a published author, and she used to do, she was the executive director over budgeting for the state of Utah, I believe, and she's going to be speaking on thriving through adversity in August. So we've got some great events coming up, and we hope you'll all join us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Christy. I also just want to pose the final question to all of us, the 4 of us. What was the one takeaway from today's conversation in 10 seconds? Let's start with Scott, then Christy, and then Dr. Rappaport.
Well, there's a lot, but I'd love the reinforcement of the connection between mental health and physical health and some of the things that we can do to improve our own individual resilience. And that's an easy way to do that. So I, for one, need to get back on that train.
Love, love, love that. Christy.
Yeah, I just appreciate the take on how individual mental health is. And how going forward, the need for empathy as we move back into whatever our new normal is going to be and understanding with one another. I think that's absolutely vital.
Agreed, agreed. And Dr. Rappaport.
I've just been very impressed by the program that Zion Bank has developed in mental health and the priority that you're placing on it, as well as the inclusion of mental health in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you for doing that.
Oh my gosh, such an honor to have you. My takeaway, I think I'm just going to keep annoying people with positivity. And final question to you, Dr. Rappaport. Could you at some point introduce us to your wife? I feel like we all need her in our lives. She just sounds like an amazing person, and we would love, 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 love to meet her.
Absolutely. And she is an amazing person, and I'm blessed to have her as a partner.
We believe you. So in closing, just want to thank all of our guests for joining us, our audience for tuning in. We look forward to continuing this conversation in our teams, our organizations, and ultimately in our community. As we continue to reflect on today's conversation, may we remember our intentions for hosting these conversations is one voice, one story, one conversation can make the difference. And our goal with these quarterly mental health conversations is to cultivate a healthy mind, a healthy culture, a healthy bank, and ultimately a healthy community. On that note, it is our pleasure to announce the launch of our Zion's Community Speaker Series next month in honor of Pride Month. We will hear from a panel of community leaders leading in the LGBTQIA+ community, coming together to examine the personal, professional, and policy-related experiences of members of the LGBTQIA+ community in the workplace. The launch of our Zion's Community Speaker Series will be Tuesday, June 22nd from 12 noon to 1:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Stay tuned on our One Zion's DEI homepage for more details coming soon. And in closing, just want to reiterate our mission here at Zion's Bank to build economic inclusion by opening opportunity, increasing access, and investing our capital. And when we say capital, we mean human capital, our people, social capital, our relationships and trust that we build with one another and our community, and then financial capital. Building a culture of inclusion begins with us. It begins with me. It begins with Christy, Scott Law, Scott Anderson, and Dr. Rappaport. And then again, it begins with you. So thank you again for joining us. We hope to see you next month for the launch of our Zion's Community Speaker Series.
And Sui Lang, if I could, I'd just like to come on at the end and thank you and Christy and Scott for your help in putting this together and the wonderful meeting we had today. And Mark, thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us. It was just fabulous. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure, Scott.
Yeah, we are honored to have your leadership. You model inclusive leadership every day. Scott Anderson and Scott Law and all the other Scotts at Zion's Bank. We have a lot of them. Thanks, everyone. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Dr. Rappaport.
My pleasure.